Hello, and welcome to Politics for the People. I'm your host, Michael Striano. Thanks for listening and joining in the conversation. You can find links to our Patreon and Instagram in the show notes and sign up for our weekly newsletter. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts to help others find the show. Okay, let's get to it. Our topic today, elections. We all know that every couple of years we vote, but how much do we know about the voting systems themselves? You know, every 4 years we vote for president, but did you know that your local government and not the federal government controls that election? This episode will take a look at what's really going on behind the scenes, leading up to us going to the polling locations and casting our vote on Election Day. In keeping with tradition, we'll start with a definition. Elections are official selections of individuals to serve in governmental positions. There are many different positions, ranging from Board of Education, City Council, or State Senate members, up to United States representatives, senators, and the President. Each has their own responsibilities, qualifications, and expectations, but they're all essential to the functioning of our government in ways big and small that affect our daily lives. Each state and the District of Columbia has their own election laws, including who oversees and administers the election. But generally, it's some combination of state and local agencies and the state's Secretary of State. The only involvement by the federal government is through the Federal Exchange Commission. The FEC is a regulatory agency that was created to implement and enforce the country's campaign finance laws. As more and more money flowed into elections, Congress realized that the job of enforcing the laws was too large for any existing committee or organization to oversee, so they created the FEC in 1975. To ensure the committee remained nonpartisan, the makeup of the FEC was very carefully laid out. It would consist of 6 members, each serving a term of 6 years. Every 2 years, 2 members would be replaced by the President nominating and the Senate confirming the candidates. Additionally, no more than 3 members would be allowed to represent either political party. An action taken by the Commission must be approved of by at least 4 members of the Commission. In the wake of the 2000 election, the Election Assistance Commission was also created. This independent and bipartisan commission develops policies and guidelines to assist state and local election officials. The EAC consists of 4 members who, like the FEC, are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Outside of these 2 entities, elections are executed solely on the state and local level. Because we have a decentralized election system, it's actually inaccurate to say we have 1 presidential election. In actuality, we have 51. Each state and the District of Columbia runs their own separate election, governed by their own laws and overseen by their own officials. The United States contains 3,069 counties, with each county's election officials doing everything from managing and staffing polling locations to ensuring the security and integrity of the ballots themselves. Even the titles can vary, with some being called county auditor, county clerk, or commissioner of elections. Regardless of what they're called, these individuals help run the 3,069 parts of our 51 elections on Election Day. That's not to say the states themselves don't have some significant responsibilities, most notably the statewide voter registration lists. Since the Help America Vote Act was passed in 2002, states have had to modernize their voter registration systems to computerized lists, which is helpful to everyone. Having a modern system makes voter registration more accessible to eligible citizens, while making the whole process much cheaper and all but eliminating the potential for confusion, mistakes, or fraud. This isn't to say that paper lists don't still exist, because they do in some places. But the advantage of a computerized system is clear and easy to see. Take the example of automatic voter registration, which now exists in 10 states and the District of Columbia. It would never be possible in an all-paper system to automatically register voters when they renew their driver's license, but it's easy for a modern computerized system. So what goes into getting everything ready for Election Day? One of the first steps is to choose the polling locations. You'd probably never think of it because it's more likely than not that your voting place has been set for some time and you know where to go. But local officials had to make that decision at some point. They look at different options with a few criteria in mind. The location must be accessible to differently abled voters, and it must optimize the distribution of voting machines and poll workers. Each county only has so many machines and workers who sign up every election, and those resources must be adequately distributed to best serve the voters. Even the location security is handled on a local level, with local law enforcement performing security sweeps of polling locations prior to Election Day. Because each individual state has their own laws governing elections, they each train their poll workers and election officials regarding all the different aspects of the laws, including various restrictions in and around polling locations. Workers are to assist voters and protect against security risks, including fraud. Election officials themselves are also trained for how to respond to emergencies such as natural disasters or fires, and even active shooter situations. What about the machines we use to vote? Where do they come from and who's making sure they work? This is one place where the Election Assistance Commission I mentioned earlier comes into play. They provide state and local governments with a list of certified machines and systems that have been tested and adhere to their protocols and standards. States don't have to use machines from this list, and the EAC communicates with the state and local governments to ensure machines and systems that have been proved faulty or unreliable aren't used. This quality monitoring program extends to machines that were never certified by the EAC or have lost their certification. To ensure both the votes and machines themselves are secure, the machines are never connected to the internet or each other, and the transportation of machines and ballots is handled by state and local security protocols. One important thing to keep in mind since we've been talking about state and local governments is the cost of running elections. In the last election before the Help America Vote Act was passed, it was estimated to have cost state and local governments $1 billion. While the majority of election expenses fall on local governments, state governments do provide some crucial aspects of preparing for the elections, such as maintaining voter databases and getting information out to the people about when, where, and how to vote. All in all, it's a team effort, with some guidance provided by the federal government, but the work really falling on state and local governments. Perhaps the most relevant question in 2020. What about absentee voting? There are various terms used for this by different states, some calling it vote by mail and others referring to it as advance ballots. We're going to stick with the term absentee voting for consistency. The practice dates back to the Civil War and was created so soldiers fighting around the country could vote in their home states. Since then, it's gotten more complicated, but all states offer absentee voting, although some do require a reason, and all have their own rules and regulations governing absentee ballots. In 2020, states allow fear of contracting the coronavirus as an acceptable excuse, but normally the excuses are not particularly strict and can include jury duty, work, illness and injury, or even age. The process is fairly straightforward and includes multiple safeguards to prevent against fraud. After someone requests an absentee ballot, the first verification process begins, checking that the person exists, is registered, their information is correct, and possibly even a signature verification, depending on the state, all before the ballot is even sent out. After the voter receives their ballot, their return options also vary by state, with some accepting return by mail and even offering postage, while others permit ballots to be collected at polling locations or designated drop-off boxes. After the ballots have been received and put through the verification process once again, when they can be counted varies by state. Most states allow the process to begin before Election Day, with some requiring officials to wait until polls have opened, and 3 states making them wait until polls are closed to begin processing absentee ballots. You've probably noticed a theme with absentee voting. Everything varies by state. Even the deadlines for everything from voter registration to when the ballots can be returned depend on the individual states. Some states will accept ballots postmarked by Election Day, while others must have received the ballot by the time polls close. It certainly reinforces what we've found. Elections are state and local events with very little federal intervention. Now for the final question, as with all of our episodes. Why should we care? Why does it make a difference to everyday Americans whether the federal government or state and local governments run our elections? Why did we feel it was important and warranted an entire episode? The 2020 election is unlike any we've seen before, because 2020 is unlike any year we've seen before. The legitimacy of our elections is being called into question because of doubt and distrust on both sides of the political spectrum. And we feel the only way to combat such a lack of confidence is by really understanding how the systems work. That's the reason we started this podcast. We hope we've helped shine a light and demystify our elections and the systems and ideas we've covered so far. Please feel free to reach out with any questions and research for yourself from reputed sources. Remember, much like our elections themselves, no one person has the ability to completely hijack our government. The federal government has very little say in our elections, and the president themselves has none. If you don't like how your state runs its election, your only choice is to vote. That's exactly why it's so important to vote in every election, up and down the ballot, selecting people to serve us in government. Thanks for listening, and a special thanks to our patrons on Patreon for your help in making this happen, and all those who have left us a review. Be sure to check out the show notes, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter and follow us on Instagram at Politics for the People Podcast. Want to help shape the conversation, have a say in episode topics, and get exclusive content, including early access to episodes and live conversations with me? Check the show notes, head on over to our Patreon page, and subscribe for as little as $3. We'll see you Wednesday with our newsletter, and Friday with a brand new episode. Take care.